Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Irreplaceable Truths. I'm Dr. G, where we get together and try to discuss about veterinary medicine lessons learned the hard way. I am with a very good friend of mine today, Ryan Foerstner. How are you doing?
Doing great, Dr. G. How are you doing?
Oh my gosh, how long are we? 15 years?
Almost. Yeah, I would say probably 13 and a half for sure.
Yeah, we've been doing stuff together.
Yeah, we've seen some changes.
We've seen a lot of changes. Yep. Yeah, we have, and we'll get into those changes. Yeah. So, Ryan, you are working with Provide.
Yeah, Provide. Yeah, we're veterinary. I'm veterinary specific, and Provide is a healthcare lender. So we do veterinary, dental, and medical lending.
Yeah, you say the word lending, and a lot of veterinarians go running for the hills.
Yeah.
But a lot of early career vets don't realize that you need money to spend money to make money.
Certainly, yes.
One of the biggest fears that you read about, hear about everywhere in the veterinary profession is that a lot of these early career vets, right, they're in one of the most expensive professional degrees to get. How does this financial burden shape their career choices?
It's a great question because it's something we run into, or just a common myth in lending is that if I have substantial debt that from my education, from college, that it may be more difficult or more challenging to get a loan. We understand that the debt load is certainly going to be high. We've seen students $400,000 in debt coming out of, getting their DVM. And, we certainly look at the cash flow analysis and make sure that, the payments can be managed. But it's not a specific 100% barrier to getting financial lending for starting your legacy and starting a hospital of your dreams. So, we certainly will look at everything closely, but I want to assure veterinarians that coming out of school, it's not something that, we're going to look at and be ultra concerned. Debt obviously is a big thing that we look at. I think we're more closely looking at revolving debt, credit cards, things of that sort.
Yeah, I mean, these six-figure debt deals that these veterinarians sign the day they get into vet school are very, very scary.
Yeah.
That's a nice way to put it, right? I'm sure I can use other adjectives that go through people's heads.
Yeah.
But how does that impact their ability to secure financing? Like, is it a good debt to have, a bad debt to have? We all know credit card debt is bad. And I, even with my own children, I try to explain to them that there is good debt and bad debt.
Correct.
Good debt, mortgage. Correct?
Yeah.
Bad debt, Lamborghini.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So, school debt, good or bad?
I mean, it's certainly, we understand it. We understand that, you've gone to do and get a professional accreditation and get your DVM license. And so we understand that that's a part of the picture. And that's working with a lender who understands that and understands the veterinary space, that there's potentially going to be debt in getting your license. We realize that's going to be there. So, debt in general, I would say it's definitely more good debt than bad debt because you have a license now and you can practice veterinary medicine. And so, it's definitely something that we still analyze with our analysis financially, but it's not a barrier to getting loans. I work with veterinarians all day that have potentially some student loan debt from their education.
Yeah, and what's really scary is all these veterinarians that are leaving the profession within the first 5 years, then it becomes bad debt.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think it's more challenging. We look at the fact that you have a license that you can produce and you have production capabilities, and so. But yeah, if you're no longer practicing, then it could be a little bit more challenging, certainly.
Off the cuff question, because I did this when I refinanced my home. I swung my school loans into my refi.
Yeah.
Can you swing your school debt into a business loan?
That's not something we traditionally, it's not. This is going to be structured for the business itself, either a startup or if you're looking to acquire the business. We allocate and set up budgets for the actual practice purchase or the tenant improvements if you're doing a startup, along with working capital and equipment budgets. But student loan debt's not traditionally something that is part of the loan process that we consider.
So how does the student debt go into the calculation process? Because, when you own a practice, obviously whatever you net is what you take home.
Correct.
Let's say you're starting a business and it's a startup. Startup's a grind. You're not going to net a lot.
Yeah, early on.
So is there a chance these students can default on their student loans?
Well, certainly coming from a bank perspective, we do look at the risk associated with, default. But, it's something that, we want to work through. And this goes through layers of eyes that are looking at this. I work with a business analyst who's putting together a cash flow. And so that cash flow is really looking at, what's going out versus what's coming in. And in order to approve deals and get them into credit or underwriting, that cash flow ratio needs to be correct. So if you're heavily in debt or your expenses are much higher than the income coming in, then it's going to be challenging to gain approval.
So what goes into the calculation of cash flow?
So household expenses, your car, your mortgage, your student loan debt payment. There are certain things that we could add back, but overall, we're looking at your overall expenses and then comparing it to the income.
So most veterinarians don't own a home, early career vets, right? They rent. Does the rent go into play? Because, rent changes, they move. And how does a business loan affect getting a mortgage?
Well, so with a business loan, that's going to be structured under the business entity that's created by that veterinarian. And so on the business side, that when you're running credit, you're not necessarily going to see that business loan because it's under the actual corporation. So, that's something that we look at and we understand, and it's not going to impact tremendously. We do look at closely, the personal financial situation of that particular veterinarian. Specifically, we're going to look at liquidity, which is like what's in your checking or savings account, and any non-retirement securities, any money that's liquid, along with, what debt or revolving credit card accounts you have. And then the third major thing we do look at is production capabilities. So we're going to look at, that veterinarian as an associate and what type of producer that they are. Those are kind of the three main factors. But going back to cash flow, we need to make sure everything pencils out as far as that ratio. Ultimately, our customer's the buyer. We want to make sure that the buyer is protected and isn't in a position where they're going to be defaulting on a student loan or something else, credit cards, things like that.
I sure hope you're looking out for the buyer, because the seller's going to take the money and go to Tahiti. He's like, done.
Later.
Or she's going to go, done, right?
Most definitely. It's a big decision. I mean, this is a legacy. This is, you know it firsthand. You've started a practice and gone through that whole process. And we're the lender that's going to be with you side by side. I like to meet and go visit all veterinarians that I'm supporting through this process, because it is a hand-holding process and it's a big decision. So we want to make sure you're positioned for success.
Well, yeah, because when it comes to business, veterinary school teaches maybe just a drop.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I mean, this is a big topic, because we're trying to push veterinarians into becoming their privately owned entity now, and not doing the corporate thing.
Yeah.
Because that when practices were privately owned, that was when veterinary medicine was amazing.
Yes.
So it is a big deal to own your own practice. It is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It is a lot of ups and downs. and you also have to realize if you start up a practice or you buy a practice, and let's say you buy a practice from someone who's been there 25 years, and they might be there for a year or two. After that, you can't count on that income. It's all on you.
Correct. 100%.
And is that looked into? Like, are there deals do you recommend the deal like, hey, you're buying this practice, make sure the old owner's there X amount of time for a certain number of years? Or does the veterinarian usually say, okay, here are the keys, I'm gone, good luck?
Yeah, I mean, I see agreements where a veterinarian will stay on for a certain number of years. I would say more likely it's whoever's buying the hospitals kind of now running the show and kind of taking charge with all of that. And so, I don't see the veterinarians staying on for a long period of time. Sometimes there's a change in culture, there's a change in employees, there's a difference there, and typically the buyer is the new sheriff in town per se, and running the show.
The buck stops there.
Exactly, and that's why we do look at production reports closely. We make sure that this veterinarian has a proven track record of strong transaction and ability to service those clients effectively.
So I hate the term average client transaction.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to use that because that's total crap.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can do a splenectomy for $4,000 and then do a nail trim for $20.
Correct.
And then you divide 4,020 divided by 2.
2. Correct. 2,000. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's look at it. So a basic calculation. Do you look at the gross of the practice and what percentage that veterinarian brought in of the gross?
Yeah, so we're looking at certainly it would vary depending on, hey, is this a startup or are they purchasing a practice? So if they're purchasing a practice, we're looking really closely at the practice financials and P&L statements and what that practice is doing. Anybody purchasing a practice, we certainly want to see that revenues are at least stable or increasing. If there's ever declining revenues in a practice, that's kind of a red light where we want to, see that quote unquote bleeding stop and see that being turned around. On the startup, we have a really strong understanding of the veterinary space and the projections of what a single doctor veterinary hospital would do. So we look at that as for startup purposes to kind of gauge, that veterinarian as being a good fit, for starting up a practice.
What are the biggest financial shocks early career veterinarians usually talk to you about?
I mean, shocks in what ways? Like
they don't see them coming. Yeah, they don't see them coming.
Yeah. So, with the loans, there's typically an exhibit or an article that has certain conditions for loan approval through the closing. And so, there's going to be things like life insurance or disability or business overhead insurance. There's costs associated with, operating a business and having a CPA and a bookkeeper and having an attorney.
I was about to say lawyer.
Lawyers is a big part of that. And that's what's very unique about what we do. Since we specialize in healthcare, we work primarily with those veterinary specific contacts who know the industry and understand the industry, understand some of the common pitfalls and barriers that are going to come up financially. But everything's more expensive. If you're starting up a practice, TI and construction costs have increased considerably. And, so you need bigger budgets to be able to do those types of projects. And they take time and energy and effort. So there's, I think anytime you're getting into business, and I'm a business owner myself, there's always going to be curveballs throughout and bumps in the road. And it's important to have a strong team around you that can navigate those challenges.
And, to be an entrepreneur, own your veterinary practice, you got to be a little bit of a risk taker, but owning a veterinary practice is not a risk.
No,
it's not a risk. You're going to do just fine.
Just fine, yeah.
If you're willing to grind.
Correct. Yeah, you have to work, and you have to have a strong business plan. You have to have a good understanding of financial projections, and all of those factors are so important to being successful. But at the end of the day, I mean, clients are visiting hospitals. They want that private veterinary experience, and somebody they know and can trust and have a strong bond with to help their animals. And that's what you did such a great job for so many years. I've worked in this industry for 14 years now, almost 15, and it was just a pleasure to work with you and see how you treated your clients and how you worked. I mean, there wasn't a time that I visited your clinic and you weren't there, really. And it's something to say, because as a business owner, the work is going to be there, and you're going to have to grind. Certainly.
I mean, do you know how much stuff I would have to take on vacation in order to keep up with work?
Right.
As a business owner.
Yeah.
As an associate, it's different.
Clock out.
Right?
Yeah.
And, it was funny. My mentor that I had while I was an undergrad, I always asked him, what led you to owning a practice, to take that leap, to take that risk? And he's like, and this is an exact quote, and I love Dr. Bob Whedon. He was my second dad. He goes, Gersh, you're either going to receive the shit or give the shit.
Yeah.
Which one do you want? And I was like,
piece of advice.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. And I think if a lot of these young veterinarians that are having such difficulty,
yeah,
if they did their own thing, it's a completely different, fulfilling, rewarding, emotional roller coaster ride than if you're just working for somebody.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, you're involved in not only taking care of a patient and a pet and improving the quality of that pet's life, but you're also experiencing the human interaction, right? And seeing a technician grow as an employee, or seeing a receptionist do a phenomenal job and get those accolades, and there's just so much more. It's so much more endearing because you're involved in a much bigger thing, right? Instead of just the patient care. But it's truly incredible being a business owner. It's definitely got its challenges, and there's moments where you're like, oh no, what did I do? Right? But
it's trial and error. I mean, watch Shark Tank.
Totally.
Watch Shark Tank. Yeah. Shark Tank teaches you exactly the pitfalls of entrepreneurship, which is the biggest one is growing too big too quickly. And the other one is not grinding hard enough.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you have to recognize if you're going to start a business or purchase a practice that, you're going to need to invest time to get that practice up and going. Once you have an incredible team, and maybe if you've hired an associate to work alongside you, maybe down the road there's a time where you can kind of lighten up a little bit, but early on it's going to be a push, certainly.
So when a young vet calls you up and says, "Hey Ryan, I'm interested in securing a loan."
Yeah.
Should they be interviewing you?
I believe 100% you should always interview your lender. And in fact, I mean, the entire team of veterinary-specific professionals that you're going to work with, realize it's not just about the loan. You're also establishing a banking relationship. So, what are the services of that bank, or what are the nuances of like working with, a banker? Do I have to call an 800 number and go through a phone tree, or do I have a dedicated concierge service at my side?
I.e. cell phone number.
Yeah, cell phone number, which is big. Provide, in my mind, like one of the main reasons I came over is I was blown away with the technology and the people. We only specialize in healthcare, but we try to make this process less arduous, right? Nobody likes to go out.
There's no way it can be.
Well, nobody likes to go out and get a loan and all the paperwork involved. But what's very unique with our technology is we have the ability to do this fully digital from start to finish. And we can even invite CPAs or contributors to help support that. So we're trying to make it an easier process overall. But you should definitely interview your lender and all aspects of your veterinary team that's supporting you, because you need a strong team behind you, because it's not an easy process, and you need people who have done it before and are comfortable in that space. They're very comfortable with the common pitfalls that you may run into through the process. So certainly important.
So I interviewed you. I'm like, Ryan, you're my guy.
Yeah.
What do I need to have in place to get going?
Yeah, so certainly our process has a very simple 3 to 5 minute pre-qualification with no impact on your credit score up front. So we do that so that we can gather some basic financial details, so we can have a really good conversation about the goals through the lending process. And so the pre-qualification is important, and then you get into the actual application. Again, fully digital, so you can do this from your phone, your iPad, your computer. But you're going to want to make sure you have your personal tax returns. It's really important to have some type of production report, and I talk to veterinarians about that. Even if it's a simple picture of a report out of the practice management software, we want to try to annualize what that production capability is. So you'll want to have those documents. The documents can vary based upon, like, are we doing a startup? Are we doing a project? Are we doing an acquisition? So it's going to vary. If we're looking at doing an acquisition, we're going to need business tax returns. We'll need P&L details that are updated. So yeah, there's certainly some documentation that's required, but most of it's pretty standard documentation that can be easily retrieved.
Yeah, the hardest part when I was doing my purchases was always peeling back the personal expenses that were put into the business.
Yeah.
That's the painful part.
Yeah.
You got to, man, that took forever.
Yeah.
I mean, and it is. Ryan, you're a great guy, and I'm sure Provide is amazing, but no matter who they go through, it is a painful process.
Yeah.
So let's say they have all the documentation ready to go. Start to finish, how long does it take?
We move relatively quick. It does vary on time, kind of based on the year and based on the amount of loan requests or loan volume that's coming through. But after they fully submit the application, which could be done in as quickly as 30 to 45 minutes, I work with my analyst who performs the cash flow so that we can determine if this is suitable to be sent into credit for credit review and underwriting. And so basically that process can take anywhere from as quickly as 4 or 5 days. Maybe it's closer to like 7 or 8. Again, it's going to vary. But if we're able to get things approved through credit, then we're able to DocuSign and send over an actual loan proposal. So it's a very quick process. In many instances where there's multiple banks involved, we're normally returning pretty quickly as one of the first or second banks with a loan proposal.
So let's do a very simple, basic question.
Yeah.
I have a practice that grosses $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Without going through a bunch of hoops and all that, what's the max I could probably get a loan for?
$1 million. So, we're going to lend up to the gross of the practice. However, we can certainly, we're not going to lend more than that, but I have seen the practice sale be higher than that. And that's typically when the seller would have to do what we would call a seller's note. So if it's $1 million gross, and because of the area or because certain factors, maybe they agree upon a price of 1.2, then the seller would have some type of seller's note to make up the difference. But we're going to lend up to the gross of the practice.
Yeah, because that was the biggest problem, right? Because corporates were coming in paying 18, 20 times more than it should.
Correct. Yeah.
And are banks in general loaning 8x gross anymore?
I'm certainly not involved with those types of transactions. No.
So what keeps an owner from selling to corporate?
I mean, it's the whole word corporate, I think, is kind of a challenging word in our industry, and we've seen kind of an evolution. I've seen I've been through all of it, and I've kind of seen the evolution of it. And we're seeing now more and more privates. Even I see private DVMs looking to purchase corporate hospitals that are closing down. So, you know, it is certainly challenging, but I feel like because of that negative connotation, I feel like there's a lot of selling private veterinarians that aren't necessarily as interested in selling to a corporate entity. Maybe they want to sell to a private veterinarian
Keep the legacy going.
Keep the legacy going, exactly. So,
yeah, I mean that's hard. I mean, because when I sold, it was record numbers, right? I mean, it changed generational wealth for hundreds of veterinarians.
100%, yeah.
I really believe that hopefully that trend is done, or slowing down immensely.
Yeah.
But tough question I'm going to have to ask you.
Okay.
Here. Do you think traditional banks are failing veterinarians?
You know, it's hard to comment on their path. I'm very focused on what we're doing in the market, and I'm very happy to be working exclusively with veterinarians. I absolutely love this industry. I've been in this industry for so long, and recently made the transition into finance from biotech and diagnostics, and it's, you know, I'm so glad I made the decision to work for a company that is hyper focused on the healthcare industry in general, and I can't speak to them failing. You know, a lot of times, you know, it's finance, so they're looking at the numbers. I think that's the challenging thing, is I do have to, unfortunately, say no in certain cases if the cash flow is way off, or, you know, the amount of money in the business and checking accounts isn't suitable to be able to do the transaction. But we're trying to do everything that we can to better the industry and really talk about the value of what we're offering as a lender specific to healthcare.
So let's say I applied for a loan and I get denied. Are there alternative forms of financing you know of?
Well, so just to kind of take a step back, there's really conventional lending, which is lending through the bank, and then there is an offering to look at an SBA loan. SBA is the Small Business Administration. It's a federal group that's created to spur on economic growth and development. So SBA is an option to be able to, either it's a first-time practice owner, or maybe you know, their financials don't look quite as strong, but we can still potentially get them a loan, and we would be the lender on that loan using SBA as a federal program. That's going to have more details and more specifics through the process, so that process is going to take a little bit longer. But we're one of the lenders that can actually do both conventional lending and SBA loans.
When I did my first loan, it was SBA.
SBA, yeah.
And I remember I needed collateral. Do you still need a collateral for an SBA
Typically,
loan?
there's a collateral. Like, so if you own a house, you would collateralize the house. In that, again, we're gonna look at the deal and kind of understand what the total amount is of the loan and some of the details. But with conventional lending, typically the lien or the collateral is the practice, right? But when you pivot to SBA, there could be something like that. But I don't think it's a bad thing, as far as, like, SBA allows you to start a business, right? And get into this world of business ownership. And then typically, maybe in 2 or 3 years down the road, you do a refinance. Did you refinance your SBA loan? Do you recall, or?
Let's see. I did, actually.
Yeah.
When I bought the second half, I did.
Yeah.
And then I refinanced again when I bought my second practice.
Yep. Okay.
Now, I just thought of something. There are also a lot of practice owners that will do their own personal financing for the buyer.
For the buyer, yeah.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's important to have an attorney involved in making sure that you know, there's representation from both sides to you know, cover the interests of each respective party.
And not the same attorney.
And not the same attorney, 100%.
You get your own attorney.
You get your own attorney, correct. So I don't think it's a bad thing. It could be a great opportunity. And, if the seller's willing to provide a seller's note or finance that, I think as long as the terms are favorable in what they're providing, I don't think it's a terrible thing by any means. But yeah,
It's less paperwork.
it's certainly less paperwork, most definitely. There's probably attorney's fees involved, but outside of that, it certainly could be some less paperwork. But the terms may not be as favorable. What are we talking about as far as repayment term? Is there kind of an interest-only period? Most of our project loans, we include interest-only on the front end to preserve.
For how many years?
Typically, like a startup, we could typically do 24 up to. If it's acquisition, maybe 9. So, it's not that you have to do only, those interest-only payments. Some owners want to start principal faster. But at least it gives you some flexibility up front. As you know, is like preserving that cash flow in the initial 6 months is going to be very, very critical.
Yeah, I love the interest-only payment.
Yeah.
Especially if the interest is fixed. It's not an ARM or something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because that adjusted rate mortgage could come back and bite you in the butt, i.e. 2007, 2008, 2009. But I think there's nothing wrong with having business debt. It's
Correct.
nothing you need to pay off quickly. Because chances are if you grind and you work hard, you're going to sell that practice hopefully for 2, 3, 4, 5 times what you bought it for.
Yeah,
right?
Most definitely.
That would be in theory what you're shooting for.
Yep.
So yeah, I love that interest-only concept.
Yeah.
I think it's something that a lot of these early career vets really need to look into.
Mm-hmm.
It could really help cash flow immensely.
Yeah.
And if nothing's going towards principal, that's fine, because a lot of people believe they need to pay off their business loan, their mortgages as fast as possible. Those of us who are lucky enough to get, mortgages at what, 2%, 2.2%, 2.3%. I made sure my wife understood, if I pass away in my sleep tonight, you do not pay off the mortgage.
Correct.
You just put it on auto deduction.
Auto deduct, yeah.
Because, the banks want you to pay off that low interest mortgage because they're losing money on it.
Correct. Yeah. Cost of funds. Yeah.
So mortgage rate or business loan rate right now today, what is it?
We're in the 5s. I mean, I would say very
really?
competitive.
5s?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly.
That's very good.
And that's going to be one of the main differences between, conventional lending and SBA. SBA is going to base the rate off prime, whatever prime is, which is currently 7.5. And so it may be a little above or below that. But, rates...
2.5 on $1 million is a lot of money.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's... Yeah.
Provides 5% loans, interest only.
We can do interest only for the initial...
you said if it's acquisition, you're like 9 years or 9 months?
9 months.
9 months. Yeah. Wow.
So most of these are based off like a 10-year amortization, which is basically the amount, 120 months on the loan.
So if you close the loan, you shook your hand with me.
Yeah.
What financial risks or what financial mistakes would you tell me to avoid?
I mean, really, you want to control your fixed costs, which is typically your lease costs. Obviously, salaries is going to be a big part of the equation. But
payroll.
Yeah, payroll is going to be, one of your biggest expenses. But, whether you acquire a practice or a startup, one of the major questions that I ask kind of up front is, what is that lease payment? If you're at a leasehold, we want to ensure that, you're not in a position where you have a $15,000, $20,000 a month lease payment. Those are your fixed costs. So you have to have some control over that and minimize that, because you have a loan that's got a fixed cost as well for a certain period of time. So you don't want to cripple yourself with heavy expense burden for the business, prior to even opening the doors. So it's important to understand what those payments are going to look like. We also do commercial real estate as well, commercial real estate financing. and even ground up, which here in Southern California, it's hard to find space to do a ground up construction project.
Well, you can go in the middle of the desert.
There you go. Yeah, certainly you can. Where I'm from, Yuma, Arizona, maybe you'll find a spot there, but it's really important to have a good handle on those fixed expenses, and because salary then is going to be a big one. You'll have to consider a variable expense.
So can you break it down for the listeners? On your monthly gross income, what percentage do you want to see going towards lease?
Towards the lease, I mean, I talk in general.
5%?
I mean, 5% I think would be great. I mean, it would depend on what that gross number ends up being, your location, everything like that. So I could certainly follow up with like a better number on what that range is. I don't know right off the top of my head, but certainly I kind of talk in generalities as far as like, hey, if you're doing a startup and this is an $800,000 loan, like you don't want to be in a position where you're more than like 10, 11, 12K a month in your, as far as your lease.
That's 10%. That's about 10%.
10% on that. Yeah. But yes, certainly. You want to protect yourself and not be in a huge hole to begin with.
So I would figure payroll is probably about 22, 25%.
Yeah.
Does that include?
I've seen a variance across the board.
But I mean, do you include in your payroll what I'm paying myself?
Certainly we look at that. I mean, it really would depend how you're paying yourself. Are you salaried? Are you taking dividends? Like, we would want to understand that process. But yeah, we're going to look, that's going to be a salary expense line. And I've looked at P&Ls and seen a wide variety of salary and expense lines, but I think the numbers you threw out between 20, 25%, I've seen them higher. I've definitely seen them lower.
So going forward, what does Provide see as the trend for veterinary medicine?
I mean, we're just sticking close to the pulse, like of what's happening. I'm certainly becoming involved in transactions where, like I mentioned before, private veterinarians are purchasing a corporately owned hospital. In fact, I was just talking to a veterinarian yesterday about that. A certain number of hospitals nationally, corporate owned, that were closing their doors. So we're seeing that more as a trend. And the pendulum's definitely swung backwards from that regard. This industry, we're seeing now kind of a leveling out versus the COVID years, right, where it spiked and jumped, but it's still growing. It's a wonderful industry, and there's organic growth. And the millennials, the younger generation, certainly are visiting their veterinarians. They're giving exceptional care to their dogs and cats out there, and so we would expect to see like a continued growth in that area. What we're trying to do as a lender is really kind of focus, like it is 2024, right? Let's make this process fully digital, as easy as possible, and provide you with people who understand the industry and are good people.
Easy is the key word.
Easy and simple is very valuable. Yeah. Time is money at the end of the day, and we know that it's a challenging process. Nobody wants to wake up and try to find a loan, but it's a very vital aspect at the very beginning of this process. You're probably going to you're going to work with and interview your lender, right? And then you need to find a location. So if you're looking to either start up or purchase a hospital, those are a couple things very, very early on. You need to make sure you surround yourself with the right people.
So speaking to new career vets, what financial strategy would you recommend in the first few years?
Yeah, so I think making sure that you can document and you're building up a proof case for your strong production capabilities. You certainly want to minimize the Ferrari purchases and the big expenses that are going to impact your...
Ferrari purchases are for medical students, not veterinary students.
Yeah. Bottom line...
So the Foerstner...
Bottom line, you want to try and... I talk to veterinarians all the time about how to position themselves to look more favorable from a lending perspective. And a big part of it is just no really big purchases that are going to negatively impact your cash flow. and then working to save up, some money in your checking and savings account. We're not looking for wild amounts of money, but typically you want to make sure you probably have at least 5 to 10% of whatever the loan amount is fully liquid in your checking and savings account or non-retirement securities. So as a new vet, it's really about trying to save money and minimize your heavy expenses. Try to stay away from the credit cards. We don't mind the credit cards if it's a situation where that's paid off monthly, but we want to see strong financial habits essentially.
And if it's paid off monthly, they're going to want to see the bank statement out of what checking account that paid that.
Yeah, we're typically going to look at, they use Plaid now, but we're going to audit some of that information. But
so you were saying that Provide has podcasts.
Yes.
Will that help with the financial literacy of these early career veterinarians?
Most definitely. So Provide specializes in not only veterinary but dental and medical lending. So we're only managing the healthcare space. And if you have an opportunity, check out The Path to Owning by Provide. We do have, of course, dentists on there because we work on the dental side as well. But there's some great, wonderful experts in the arena of veterinary. So whether it's a CPA talking about some things that veterinarians need to be focused on, or a design build firm that specializes in architect and construction. There's a slew of podcasts managed by Corey Brown in our marketing group who does those podcasts. So definitely check it out. It's called The Path to Owning.
The Path to Owning.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what website can they find it at?
Just Apple podcasts through Apple. That's where I at least go to it. I'm sure it's on YouTube. So many different forums now, right, to get this information out. And I love what you're doing, Dr. G, as far as educating the younger veterinarians so we can come in and have a good conversation and they're prepared for this process.
If you could change one thing on the veterinary financing side, what would it be?
Ooh, geez, change one thing.
Are there a few things? You can go down.
No,
we got
not
time.
a few things. I think, it's challenging to have difficult conversations when a client, unfortunately, the deal doesn't cash flow or there's a problem. And we wish we could say yes to everyone, but the reality is there's certain guardrails and guidelines financially that need to be in place. So, unfortunately, I have to say no sometimes. And from my perspective, I hate doing that. I want to support the community, better the community any way I can. But the way I look at it is like it's really actually an opportunity to kind of educate that veterinarian on how they can make some changes to position themselves maybe 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road. So
the first time I was going to be bought out,
mm-hmm.
I had to send my financials in. And they were like, Dr. G, you make a lot of money, but we can't buy you. And that was like, I was like, is that a backhanded compliment? I mean, I don't understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
The greatest thing is they went through my financials like you would to
mm-hmm.
someone you said no to.
Yep.
And they explained exactly what I needed to fix.
Yeah.
So if anything, it is a free audit.
Correct.
Of your books.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So don't take a no as like, this is never going to happen. Take the no as a coaching opportunity.
100%.
And use it to your advantage.
100%. Like even a lot of veterinarians aren't even aware of this, but when you're looking for a location, if you engage kind of a veterinary specific real estate agent, there's not a fee or a charge or a cost that, they are there to help find a location, so it's, you gotta, this is why I love what you're doing is you're getting some good content, good education out there. You really got to leverage the experts and who understand this space to take it as a coaching or an educational opportunity to position yourselves better.
Yeah, you got to leave your ego at the door sometimes.
100%.
I mean, I was guilty as charged.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know, I'm not really egotistical. I'm just, I'm very confident. clients do that to you all the time. You got to be able to control those emotions and all those things.
Correct.
But last question I'm going to have for you.
Yeah.
Let me set the stage.
Okay. Oh, geez.
You're at XYZ veterinary school speaking to 150 veterinary students, right?
Yep.
What one thing would you say to them about their career ahead, their future, the profession?
Yeah. I would certainly remark that if you even have an inkling of wanting to actually be a business owner, to really, again, leverage the experts, but really take the bull by the horn and go after it. I mean, there's a lot of fear and apprehension in making a big step like that. I don't own a veterinary hospital. My wife and I own a small business, and the stepping off to be able to do that was a very big thing. I think you remember when I was going through that process. And then when we actually opened, COVID happened 9 months later. So, there were a lot of challenges put in front of us, and that is such a rewarding thing to grow personally and professionally, because those difficult moments really make you stronger as an individual, and
I would you.
Correct. Yeah, it defines who you are and defines your legacy and what you're going to leave behind for your children. So, I would say if you're even thinking about it, go in full force. There's so much content, so much information out there. You'll be able to learn a lot at no cost, and so, I think if I'm standing in front of a bunch of veterinarians, I'm really talking about, don't be afraid of it. Just learn and prepare yourself and go after it, because it's so rewarding at the end of the day. When you're working with various clients who are just enamored with your ability to resolve a specific case, or, I mean, you were the best at that, is like, finding something that maybe another veterinarian may have missed or something. Those are such rewarding moments, or the staff growth. Nothing really other than, children and marriage and some of the key life milestones, nothing's more impactful. So I would say go after it and prepare yourself and do everything you can to make an impact in this community. It's a wonderful, wonderful space, the veterinary space. So.
Well, Ryan, I want to thank you for coming. And
thank you.
I would like to thank Provide for everything they're doing for the veterinary community.
Yep.
And I'm going to recommend you go and listen to those Provide podcasts, so you get some sort of financial literacy, even if you're not going to buy a practice, just so you know, because that information is also important if you want to buy a house.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll just kind of plug here at the end is, if you go to our webpage, which is www.getprovide.com, there's actually a drop down at the top where you could search for veterinary hospitals that are for sale. We partner with a lot of veterinary brokers out there, so we have all this information on one single page where they could search practices available in Los Angeles County. And it's obviously not going to list the names of the practices, but it'll give you an indication of general location, number of exam rooms, annual collections. So there's some great resources out there to start the process.
And with that, again, thank you.
Thank you.
I know a lot of this money talk is not super exciting to a lot of veterinarians, but it's very important. Very important.
Yeah.
Because, if you're going to sit around and complain about school debt, then you better get financially literate.
Correct. 100%. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Dr.
You got
G.
it. Ryan,
Nice
I'll
to
see
be
you
out here.
soon, buddy.
Okay. Round 2.
Yeah.